Thanks, Judy.
You're lucky. I have to.
That's the first I've never seen you wear pants.
It's just a message.
You're lucky.
All right, Tanner, are you ready?
Yeah, it's the panda flu.
All right.
You racist.
Okay. Call this meeting to order. And Murph, would you lead us in the flag?
Yes, ma'am.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You're here. Okay. First off, this is the time of year when we have our election of officers. So we'll do that first before we go on with the meeting. And I would open the floor for discussion. Well, hearing none,
Everybody at once.
What are you going to discuss?
what are we going to discuss? There are positions, I guess we'll start out. Do we want to start with the chairman, just have discussion? Do we want to just stay the same? What are your feelings on our officers moving forward for next year? Jerry, that was not a comment. Yawn.
I think we should just leave the slate.
All right, I'll step into the snake den here. So, I guess my question, firstly, I want to apologize for the charade that I've seen personally as the council representative to the DDA. I feel like I haven't communicated well enough, or else there's just a whole bunch of tension behind what's going on. So, my question to the DDA is, okay, if we got so many people who are not happy about where things are at, what can we do internally to shake things up, to give people a sense that it's business, not business as usual? And I don't have an answer. I'm just asking you because I saw what happened with the last couple of council meetings. I'm like, it doesn't even make sense to me. It doesn't make sense that the city should stand in the way of the DDA doing what the DDA is supposed to do. And so, but it makes me look inside and say, okay, well, how can DDA do something different, at least in appearance, to give, just to give a sense that things are really moving forward? Because and I don't mean to be offending anyone else, but I'm disappointed that council is making good citizens who are on this board look like you got some other agenda. So that bothers me. So I apologize for that, and so I just opened the discussion with that.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate your awareness of that. A lot of this, I think, is from just old baggage. Murph, go ahead. Jan wanted to talk too, so Murph, go ahead.
Defer to Jan.
For Jan, you were going to make a statement when Robert.
Well, I'm satisfied with the slate the way it was, and I was just going to say let's leave it the way it is. But that certainly is not my decision. It's just my opinion.
Okay.
But Robert's right. Robert is very right.
Well, it just continues to go on and on and on. It doesn't matter what we do or don't do. It just goes on and on. Murph?
Well, first off, if we're going to make a bunch of if we're going to make changes or do something, then let's see to it that whatever we do is effective and creates change. Is my thoughts on it. Suzanne, has anybody applied to the DDA? Yes. I see. So we're going to have continuance of what we've got. So we've got all these
Recommendation council is reopen it up and also send resolution council up to the Republican council for fire members.
I can understand why some people will want to do that. That would make it far easier to manipulate the board with just 5 people on it, as opposed to a good cross section of the community.
All I'm saying is what the council.
I got that. I understand, but that's my opinion on it. And as we sat here and the continue to march, I saw a missive online from one of the councilmen to another that stated, gee, I went back and looked at what the Downtown Development Administration did, and that's what he called this, and it was an outstanding item. Oh my gosh, all this, the plans that the city paid $1 million for was so great. And I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, it worked out really well for us. I mean, the pool was supposed to go over there, it didn't. And many of the things that we have taken on, as Ms. Mary Jo said, is the baggage from previous things, just like the city council has to deal with, and just like the city staff has to deal with. When somebody steps into a position, they wind up carrying the baggage from those previous items. However, we sat here today, and it was such an outstanding idea that we got a pool that cost us, and all of us, the taxpayers, a lot of money every year. Government has a way. The Mustang Ranch being an example of running things into the ground whenever they cannot. Government sees a great idea. Government's not the greatest at business. Business owners are better at business.
Yeah. Well, Al,
Mary Jo, being that the makeup of the board could potentially change once council makes their decision, would it be wisest for us just to continue as we are now until such time that we know what the final makeup of the board is?
I think that's a good suggestion. I don't know about the rest of the board, but at some point we may have to revise. I don't know. We're moving forward. We do have a plan that's active on the board. I've got some recommendations that I would like to make. I think that we are moving forward. We already know that our term limit is dwindling. We have, 11 years left? It's starting to wind down, and we need to wind it down, the whole DDA. I think what Al said is we can't worry about council. Council has their own issues that they have to deal with. I think we need to worry about us. And I think that just moving forward like we are, we're getting some momentum coming out of COVID. I think we should continue to do that, personally. Tanner, I know you had your hand up.
So are you suggesting just leave officers in place as is for now and table the item until after whatever council appointments?
Correct.
Can we legally do that? Or do we just take a vote to just leave it as it is and make a vote so that it's legal? And then if something else comes up, we'll have to readdress the issue and handle with that problem, whatever it is. When you talked to Paul, did he have anything to say about us electing officers?
No.
He didn't.
It
Okay.
never came up.
Okay.
I don't know why it wouldn't be. How about motion to table the election of officers until our first meeting following council's final decision on DDA board appointments.
Okay. Do I get a second?
Well,
Nick seconds that? Okay. More discussion? No? All those in favor? Opposed? Hearing none, we'll just table it until a later date. Okay, moving on. Additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, do I get a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes from May 5th?
So maybe.
Yes?
I just have a quick question on the minutes on page 6. It looks like there's a timestamp and these in red. I just wanted to ask, hadn't had a chance to review those ahead of time.
You know what I think that is? I was writing and most of the time when I was out there working together.
I don't know that it matters.
Okay. Okay, so do I get a motion to approve
So
the
maybe.
agenda and the May 5th minutes? Second?
Second.
Second by Ellen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, minutes approved. Finance update. I hope we have good news.
Well, nothing significant. Just, so the report that should be passed out, does everybody have a copy? Okay. This is, you'll see 4 columns. There's our 2019 approved budget, then the unaudited actuals as I have them. Now, I have not reconciled this with city finance yet. Emily and I are back and forth on scheduling a meeting to sit together and reconcile our numbers. And I haven't seen the CAFR yet, so I don't know what's in the city's books as far as our DDA fund, but these numbers reflect what I've recorded for 2019.
Okay.
So for all of the revenues here at $611,865.79, I have revenue receipts from the county treasurer that add up to that. There were abatements for, I think, the Gold Hill North property and maybe Gold Hill South. So those are recorded. You'll see where we had budgeted $415 for interest on deposits, and Emily did confirm that our interest income was $7,414, so we're in good shape there. Miscellaneous revenue of $41.77 reflects the donations that were made for the stagecoach and horses. Moving to as well, so total revenue $613,976.81, which is $15,336 more than budgeted. And in expenditures, of course, you can see where we're at there. Moving down to the first item of, if any, expenditures, advertising publication. There were 4 Mountain Jackpot invoices paid last year at $25 apiece. Professional services, legal services, IT, etc. were pretty close to budget in most cases, below budget in legal services, $10,960, and over budget in professional services by $23,990. And part of that, the reason that we're over in professional services is that account did not exist when we budgeted for the 2019 budget. We had that amount and legal services combined in the legal services expense account. Mike Farina created this professional services line item and then pulled some of that out, so from legal services.
Okay.
Anyway, you can see debt service down below the expenditures. Bottom line, total expenditures, $29,900 below budget for net revenues of $22,128.71, which is $45,236.95 more than we had budgeted. So, fund balance, at least according to this, my records, closed out at $70,042.01. Again, I need to reconcile this with city finance. That's where we're at so far. And
Good.
you can also see the third column there's over under, so whether we were over or under budget in each line item, and the last column is our 2020 approved budget. Okay?
Good. So we have more money than we budgeted for. I like that.
And on the back side of that document, I did begin tracking monthly revenues and recording the county treasurer's fee and if there were any abatements associated with that month, just so
Good.
you can see 2019 and so far 2020 and how the 2 years compare.
Good.
Okay?
Good, Tanner. Thank you for doing this. This will give us an idea of really kind of where we stand. This is good. Okay. Any discussion? Sally?
This is excellent. It's nice to see the report. Tanner, can you explain why the trip reimbursements are $23,000 plus $24,000 less in 19
The projections are based on individual property values as they're recorded at the time that we budget. And if mills change, which this year they did, that will affect the taxes paid by and therefore the reimbursements made to individual properties. If there are abatements affecting any of the properties that are owed, then that will affect the reimbursement. It's a good question. I didn't bring the chart, but let's see. We have Trail Ridge Apartments and Eagle Fire and Gold Hill North and Gold Hill Theaters pursuant to the same agreement, and Microtel and Tractor Supply and Taylor Mountain Enterprises, which is the car wash site and the Human Being.
There's Big O.
No,
Who else do we? Who
No.
else do we?
theirs is complete.
Which one's complete?
Rocky Mountain Dinosaur Resource Center.
Can you think of any other projects, Ward?
Dollar store?
Or the dollar store and the,
Well, those aren't reimbursements.
okay.
In those cases, in Woodland Hardware, we do have TIF agreements in place, but they're not reimbursement agreements. They're disposition and development was for the hardware store. And pursuant to those agreements, the DDA funded infrastructure improvements. And that's, well, 18 is the drawdown bond. 2012, the earlier debt was refinanced in 2012 to fund improvements at the whole, drainage improvements at the whole for O'Reilly's and
Okay.
Family Dollar, and improvements at, well, the installation of Center Street, Saddle Club, and I think utility extensions and some drainage, temporary drainage improvements at Woodland Station.
Okay.
Now, the way that the TIF agreements work with those entities is that they had agreed, because the DDA was funding improvements that benefited their developments, they had agreed to pay their property taxes beginning at certain dates and at certain levels so that the DDA would have the revenue which was pledged to Vector Bank to repay bond debt, which is where the money was, came from for those improvements. So,
Have you monitored their tax payments to ensure that they are paying what is in the development agreements?
yes, and we haven't talked about it for a couple of years, but as the board might recall, some years ago, we discovered that pursuant to those agreements, several of the entities owed pilot payments in lieu of tax to the DDA. Some have been paid, some have not. All have been invoiced.
Okay. Thank you, Tanner. This is very informative, and I really appreciate the effort that you go to keep our finances straight. I really do appreciate that. That's a level of comfort that we didn't start out with this year. Any comments from the board on this?
Tanner, one question. On the professional fees that you split out, is that like for design and stuff, or what's that kind of, why did it get split out from legal?
I believe all that's in that account right now is administrative assistant invoices.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. So we'll move on to Woodland Station if there's no more discussion on it. And I would like to say improvements to the northern portion of the property. I would guess that would go, on my part, on down to the development proposals
I would like to ask, since we have some extra money, I would like to ask that we consider some upgrade on the Cog Park site. I would like to ask that we create some property lines so that the developers will understand how we feel about the park and what we want to do with it. I passed out this little, this is the newest drawing that came from our developer and through Tanner, and it's different than what I'm going to ask for, so we need to talk about that. You can see where the lines are, but what I'd like to ask for, we had our meeting at the park, we looked at the Cog Car, we looked at the site. I would like to ask that we create a property line for the Cog Park going from the sidewalk, which is basically the property line of Bergstrom Park, goes 60 feet south, which comes up, Corey stepped it off, which comes to about the edge of the lower level. Am I correct? The upper level, and then it goes down the second, and right at the foot of that is where that 60-foot line is. And then from the back of the Cog Car, go west 40 feet. And if we do, the reason I picked that just is suggesting that it will leave enough of the behind the Cog Car for the property development below to have access to Bergstrom Park to that corner. That would be public space, park space. The development could use that as well as the community. And I'd also like to ask, is there any questions about that?
Go ahead, and I have some.
Al,
yeah,
go ahead.
At some point. Yes, Mary Jo, I understand that we need to define where the Cog Car is going to sit. It's my impression right now that that's going to be a permanent location. Is that true, particularly if we do any improvements?
I would say yes. That's up to the board.
If that's the case, then we need to do a subdivision. We can do a subdivision around the perimeter and simultaneously define the permanent location of the Cog Car. It has been bandied around that we want to put about a 20-foot deck on the south side of the Cog Car. Okay. How much ground do we need? This particular area is in the central business district and would be subject to the setback requirements in the central business district. Depending upon what we determine is the front of that property, that determines, what setbacks have to be set. So, if by chance the north side of the Cog Car, contiguous with the alleyway, if we determine that to be the front, then we have to be able to maintain a 10-foot setback from that property line to the improvements. Then the opposite would be the rear, which is the south side. Then that would be a 0 setback requirement. Now, that may be hazardous if our deck happens to reach out 20 feet and we have a 0 setback. How do you maintain that deck? So we have to determine, how much additional land that we're actually going to want to have for the Cog Car site. Then on the sides, which would be on the east and also on the west from the property line, we'd have to have at least a 6-foot setback in order to meet the requirement.
Okay, and I think
So to do a full-blown perimeter survey and do a proper subdivision process. It's going to take some time, but we have to make a few decisions along the way. I'm proposing, too, that we do the perimeter, and that will define to people who want to do development what piece of ground they have and how they can use it. The interior lot lines, which will have to be developed later, that will then be dependent upon whatever the development that goes on in there. And then that would also allow a potential contact with Arden Weatherford to see how the AmeriGas site can fit into this whole process too. But defining a piece of property through the proper subdivision process, which will take some time, is probably the firmest way to go.
Okay, point taken. Ellen had, and then
My question was, from the handout here, how close is that retail entertainment lodging from the existing COG car? What is the distance? Does anybody have a guess or an idea of that?
well, no, and that will get into, this is kind of overlapping. That will get into the negotiating committee, so Tanner probably has the closest answer by talking with Mike Williams to answer that question. Tanner, you want to give a stab at it?
I have no idea what the distance is. You're asking between the COG car and the corner of that retail entertainment building? 25 feet, maybe?
Maybe.
Just guessing.
See, we won't know that until we define precisely what the COG car site is. Then they have an opportunity to site according to the regulations. So it's really a moot point until we put in some property.
And we make the definition.
Murph, and then Jerry. Murph?
All right, as we go forward here, I think one of the things we will have to do is work with the developer on this so that we see to it that the improvements that we can come up with would be acceptable and fit the genre that he's, or the aspects that he's developing. I would recommend that we draw the lines when the development occurs, and it will possibly save us a little bit of money by calling a surveyor out once instead of twice. Okay? That the subdivision takes place all at once of the entire thing. We come up with the proposed lines, okay, and then we bring those to Mike and make sure it's not going to rain on his parade somewhere. That we would come up with some drawings. Tanner and I talked last night about this, and Tanner suggested we come up with some drawings of the COG with the improvements that would bring that platform in, okay? And the thoughts on it is that that platform would go on the south side to help preserve the north side view and corridor down through there. Ultimately, who's going to wind up with this? City of Woodland Park. So I would recommend that that we work with the city as well, because this is probably going to be a part of Bergstrom Park at the end of the day, because it's right there. Vacate the property, subdivide, vacate the property line, and it's part of Bergstrom Park. Because the DDA isn't going to live forever, right?
Jerry?
Well, I agree with Murph wholeheartedly. We need to work with the developer on this rather than establishing. I think we want to make it all work. So the developer is part of that equation. And Al, I was in La La Land, I guess, but what were you saying about Arden Weatherford?
That he's got that piece of, I'm sorry, Adam.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Al. Sorry.
He's got that piece of ground right there that also has the potential for some kind of development moving forward.
But it's not part of Woodland Station.
I'm sorry?
It's not part of Woodland Station. Right?
Oh, I know it at this point, yeah. It's not part of the overlay district, I believe. So, the idea is to somehow, if we can possibly coordinate, and let bygones be bygones. What is going to be in the best interest of that area and the city of Woodland Park?
Well, bygones are attacking
We-
members of this board.
We go ahead and work with him somehow to see what beneficial things that we can obtain from his site and he can obtain from our site and make the development work comfortably. There is that exit on Highway 24, which is a positive. How can we utilize that to benefit the design within Woodland Station? If we don't cooperate or find a workable solution with Arden Weatherford, we may not have access to that in future development. It would seem logical to me that that would be an asset, that we have multiple entrances into Woodland Station, and that might be one of them. But, and then you can develop that zone, whatever the acreage happens to be, maybe more productively. And that way, once we know exactly what we can present to a developer on our land, and if Arden is part of that system for infrastructure, drainage, and access, it benefits us also.
Yeah, he's not
Understand.
on a proposal right now. Right now, we're dealing with Mike Williams as a developer, and there's why we're considering Arden Weatherford at this point. I'm curious.
Yes, we've been dealing with Mike Williams and that group now for a long time. I've been on the board long enough to have seen this kind of thing going on for quite some time. Other people have made plans and big proposals, none of which come to fruition yet. Now, maybe Mike and the group may actually bring something forward, but they've sure been slow. And I guess I'm willing to take a little bit bigger picture of this and move this thing forward as a bigger piece of property by utilizing also the AmeriGas site if possible. Again, it's if possible.
And I think that's a good point.
Takes
Al,
more work,
because it
yes.
is next to it, but
Oh, yeah.
Well, this-
I understand what you're saying.
See, I could see-
And we're moving forward with Mike Williams.
I could see them becoming landlocked to some degree. Look at drainage as an example, probably one of the biggest examples there. If they become landlocked, then drainage is going to be a major issue for that particular site on how to handle it. If we can work as a regional drainage system through there, it would seem logical to me that that would benefit everybody and give more usable ground for whatever activities happen to come forward.
Point taken. And Tanner and I have had some of those conversations as well.
Yeah.
And Jerry, they are downtown. I mean, we can't ignore them. So we're not including them, but can't ignore them. So don't
There's
shut it out.
Pick me.
Okay. Murph has got to talk, and then Sally, I'll get you.
No, I was going to say that if Arden were to want to come into this, it could save both the development of that property and the other property, that they work together and share the expense on the drainage and the internal improvements, that they would actually, then both parties benefit from that. And it's going to take cooperation at the end of the day for all this to occur. So,
And it could also help with CDOT, too.
you know what? I am not going to allow somebody else's sophomoric behavior to influence my dealings, okay, as part of the DDA.
We'll be open. Okay, Sally.
Thank you, Mr. Joe. Just wanted to enlighten the board a little bit further about the subdivision process. So working with your developer is key to start with, but the first step in the subdivision process is to submit a sketch plan of your final plan. And that is no fee. The purpose of the sketch plan is to have the staff and the utility companies take a look at that sketch and determine if there are any fatal flaws associated with that site plan, that subdivision. And that just takes maybe 3 weeks for us to submit. No fee, staff looks at it, we get comments back to you and the developer. And so the sketch plan is very important to determine if your lots are feasible and will meet the criteria for a final plat. Typically, you do a preliminary plat next. However, if you have all services, access, public roads, public frontage, you can go right to a major or a minor final plat. So you can skip the preliminary plat process if the sketch plan meets the criteria for a final plat. I know I'm getting a little detailed, but you need to understand the subdivision process before you jump into this. And I'd be happy to give you a flow chart or details so that you can become more educated about the steps of a final plat. Then, when you submit your final plat, it goes through Planning Commission and the City Council. So at that time, the City Council is a key reviewing body because if you intend to dedicate a parcel to the city for their future and the community's future, that's when the council will give the head nod to that dedication at some point in the future.
Okay.
So, and Al is correct on the setbacks to a point, because you have an overlay district. Your overlay district allows you to flex or change those setbacks and heights. It's proposed by the developer and then reviewed by DDA and staff, and the city council, remember, will review your development plan for living station.
Yes.
So just a little bit more detail about the process so that you can plan appropriately.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, all right, Robert, and then,
Sally, can I just ask you, so if the proposal of blending Bergstrom Park and Woodland Station were to happen, what's that look like from a planning perspective? Is that complicated? Is that straightforward?
Not at all. Not at all.
So it's
Very easy.
okay.
Al,
I was going to mention that.
But let me comment, it's a policy decision, Mr. Zulaga, whether the city council decides that that is the best plan for the community. It's a policy.
So given that, it's a straightforward process through your department?
Through the subdivision process.
Okay.
When they review the final plan, that will be discussed and determined about when it's dedicated, how it's dedicated,
So it would be city council's decision as to whether they would accept that into Bergstrom Park, in which case if they didn't, then we could plat it over to the developer, and they would own it.
You have other options.
We do.
Al,
The thing that I wanted to bring forward too is that, yes, the subdivision process, is a fairly lengthy one. And help me out here, Sally. I believe it to be something like 90 to 120 days from beginning to end.
Well, there are many factors that go into that timeline.
Yeah.
Because the surveyor has to perform and prepare the proper documents. But the actual, once you submit your final plat and it's a complete application, going through the planning commission and city council can be as short as 60 days. But again, it's dependent upon the performance of the board and the surveyor and those sorts of things. So it can get drawn out if you're unable to perform.
So if we have the subdivision done and the perimeter lines and corners established, to do a minor subdivision internally is much shorter.
Well, a minor plat skips the preliminary plat step.
Yeah, is it preliminary? If all
Preliminary plat is required if you're extending roads and infrastructure. I can see lot 2, that was originally part of a preliminary plat that has since expired, being a minor plat. But again, it starts with the sketch plan. And when we get a sketch plan, then we put our brains in gear and look at the foundation of this plan.
So by having the perimeter well established, then the developer could go ahead and design the piece of ground that they need for that given structure, meeting the various requirements, for the city and the overlay district. That's going to be important to have that piece of ground well defined as they go into the capital market, because that becomes part of the collateral to obtain capital, to build it. A capital source is not necessarily going to take the whole structure or the whole piece of ground.
Right.
They're going to want to focus on that which is, we'll say, foreclosable, and that defines it,
Yes,
and that's important.
yes.
Otherwise, it could cause them a lot of grief also.
More
So we
comments?
could reduce the time for the developer if we take care of the big establishing the corners.
Yes. Tanner?
So if I understand you correctly, Mary Jo, what you're suggesting is that an area around the cog car be defined.
That's really the
And-
first step, and suggesting that as the first step.
And,
Yes.
and dedicated to cog car park or that use.
Mm-hmm.
The cog car remaining in its current location and space around it being defined. And you gave us some measurements, 40 feet and 60 feet. And
Yes.
what I see drawn on the drawing here is the cog car in roughly its current location. And this is black and white, but in color, I know on this document, there's a red boundary that is drawn around that retail entertainment lodge building. You can see it on here, it's just not red. Just up and around, and then it follows the Lot 2 boundary as it was drawn on that expired preliminary plat from so long ago, all the way down to the intersection of Saddle Club and Center, and then west over to the city lot, and up that western boundary to just north of the indoor entertainment building, where it then turns east and heads straight toward Center Street before it turns north again. Do you guys see that line?
Yes.
Okay. Is that, if that were a property boundary between the cog car, the what's labeled as open plaza event space, and the private development, if that were the boundaries, would that be or would that not be compatible with your proposal?
It would be pretty close, it looks like to me.
So are you proposing to move that boundary from what's shown?
Yes?
And how would you like to move it? That,
I guess just square it up a little bit, rectangle it up a little bit.
so the retail entertainment lodge building, in what you're envisioning, would that be able to remain in the current location as drawn, or does it need to move to the south in order to accommodate your your vision?
I think just move south.
Okay. Another something like 20 or 30 feet?
And then that park area would be available to them to use. If they had an event or if they needed more space or whatever, it would still be available to them to use, but it would be owned by the city or whomever.
And based on the dimensions that I remember you giving earlier, the remainder of the open plaza event space would change as well. What I think you described is a much smaller space than what's shown. So would there be more private property?
More private property.
What do you mean by private property?
It would be owned by the developer. You know, and I say this is just a start. I mean, we have to start somewhere. And we have to, I would really like to ask for some land improvement of the car park. I mean, we've got to get a platform on it before we can use it, obviously. And I think that starting there, I believe would incentivize our developer to maybe even look at it closer as the property, not just his development, but as the property. Ellen?
Can we have the update from the negotiating committee perhaps, and then circle back around?
Well, yeah, that's their, So what are you thinking?
Well,
I mean, now we're having to go into the negotiating and the developers to talk more about this because it's overlapping, so go ahead.
so the last email I'd received is one that I forwarded to the board. It came in on June 30th at 6:15 p.m. It was addressed to Murph and myself. It's from Mike Williams. Did the board receive a copy?
You
Okay.
did.
Very positive.
I have a copy here if anybody'd like to see it.
Concludes with, I believe I speak for George, Mark, Scott, and myself in saying that the DDA's service to Woodland Park is sincerely appreciated. We look forward to hopefully partnering together very soon. I have spoken with Mike Williams since then. He called yesterday and just wanted to update me with a couple of things. One is that they have begun writing the narrative that Sally had described during our last meeting with the developers, and so they're working on that. They do believe they have a finalized, so they have been drawing their own revisions to this concept so that we can avoid any additional cost, at least at this point, with John and NES. As they're coming up with ideas and modifying their plans, they've been drawing those. They have a drawing that is just a sketch. It's not what we would expect to see from John, but it's their version, their rough sketch of what Mike believes is a finalized plan. They're waiting for one of their investor partners to review it, who's not yet had a chance to do so. Everyone else on their team has approved that as final and ready to submit to us as their final proposal in terms of the concept. Once that last investor or partner has reviewed it, if he approves it, they will be submitting it to us for review, with the idea that, at least what they're proposing, is that if the board likes it and approves it, it would then be submitted to John for a final draft to be produced of a concept plan, which would give us something to show the public with some level of detail, something to give to the city and the city council and inform everybody as to roughly what the plan is. And if that's approved, then they can be turned loose to move forward with real development planning. So that's where they're at.
Well, then, Murph, you want to comment? You're on the negotiating committee.
No, I made my comment before that we
Okay.
work with the developer.
Well, I just think.
But I think we need to put down a plan, or at least a framework of a plan to move forward with that. And, like I said, work with the developer, determine our initial lines and stuff, and then we need some drawings so that we can look at what the COG's gonna look like, as far as goes with the platform, and lay everything out before we start making any decisions to, exactly what we're gonna do.
Okay, well,
I mean, I'm all about it.
Okay,
It's just we
Robert.
need a plan.
Robert, that's what I'm trying to get to, is to get us a plan going. Robert?
So, from what I've heard, it sounds like Al's comments about bringing in Arden could be a little, testy? But however, having said that, it sounds to me like he is a property owner in this whole area, and does he have access to all of this now, or is this something that's proprietary to DDA right now?
Are you referring to the drawings?
To the drawings and things, yeah.
He has access to all this.
What's that?
He has access. These are public
Okay.
drawings.
So, Al, would it be helpful if you were to approach him to say, this is where there's at? Now's a good time for you to think about, I mean, I know there's bad blood, but now's a good time for you to think about how you'd like to see your land incorporated in this, and maybe bring that in before this, or as you're getting ready for the sketch, bring some of those ideas to it now, rather than later, and then it's going to have more bad blood because there's no inclusivity. Just a thought in terms of the way this is looking. And my second thought on this, Mary Jo, is that building that's kind of right there where you're proposing to put the boundaries, is that the 3-story building? Well, that could look really cool at the bottom of the street. That building could look really cool, and you'd see it from the street, from the highway.
You're talking about at the base
I'm talking,
of
there's,
Center Street.
yeah,
It
there's
comes
this
down.
retail, what is called retail lodges or something there now. But I would kind of say you could feature that building at
I
the,
would say where you're talking about where the event center is.
my eyes aren't good enough to see that.
That little triangle,
There's no
diamond
triangle.
shape right at the bottom.
You don't have the same,
We don't have the same,
we don't have the same drums.
This is in color. Ours is black and white.
Well, where's the triangle?
okay. We don't have the same drawing.
We don't have the same drawings.
No. Okay, this one, okay, you're talking, gotcha.
So I'm saying this, the retail, and I'm not part of the committee side, these are just ideas, I'm not trying to force anything, I'm just saying that would look really cool to have that 3-story at the bottom of that street there, and then redesign some of that other, but anyway, that's just a thought. Then that allows you to keep the park and horse and buggy where they are, and not crowd that looks a little crowded. That's all my comments. Be quiet.
Okay. Well, I can just, with what I'm proposing, it would be much smaller than what the COG is on, and that building would just move down the hill further, that's all. So there really isn't that much change. Tana?
As a reminder, that building was considered Phase 1, still at this point officially is Phase 1, and they have been asking us for approval on that for quite some time. And we've had numerous discussions about it, and they've expressed adamant that they need that building to be as far north and close to Highway 24 as they can get it. And its current location, to some degree, was concession on their part to keep it from being right up against the northern boundary of the property. I doubt that the suggestion to move it to the south would be well received on their end. If that's something that is important to us, we really need to decide it. Firm and not with question about, well, what will they say or what will they think? We've had that talk. And what they've said what they've told us is north. If anything, it's going north. I think they've said exactly.
Now we get back to the height of that building.
Exactly.
So, that's our next step. Do we want that, they want it there, but do we want that tall building that far north? Then you're getting into the view, then you're cutting off the visual on the rest of the property. We need to have those discussions.
Oh, we already did that.
Well, Jerry, we haven't decided. I don't want a 3-story building next to Bergstrom Park. I'd like that to go on the record. Whether you do or not, I don't think that's where it should go. And I want more discussion about it.
I'm not saying that that's what I want, but we've already discussed
Well,
it.
we need to discuss it more because the height of that now, we talked about balloons. We haven't seen the balloons for the height, so we all get a visual of it. We haven't seen that yet. We're stalemated here. I'm trying to get us to move forward and get us off of square one into deciding some property lines, some heights. If that's moved back, that 3-story building won't be as in our face as it will.
That building
Further north.
that building is actually below grade where the cog car is. So it will not appear to be as high
Well, we
from the
wanna
street
see
as
the-
30 feet.
We want to see the balloons.
Well, who's supposed to do the balloons?
Well,
Us or them?
I don't know. That's
Well,
what
it's our
we wanna
requirement, so we
decide.
should get after it, I guess,
Well,
Tanner.
then we should, then
We're
why
gonna have
aren't
to
we
do the
doing
blue
it?
thing.
So, Ellen?
I think it would be very helpful to really do the balloon soon and to go out and see exactly where that square, that retail entertainment lodging is. I guess if it moved down just a little further, whether there's any more give and take for compromise, if it could move down just a little bit more. I think it's difficult to see exactly where that is. And if it only varies even 10 feet, it's going to make a big difference. So I think we need to go out and do that soon.
Well, if it's where it's at now, it's on that second terrace. If it moves down, it will be below that second terrace. So I think that we need to go out there and look at that to decide, because, we've got everybody, most of the people, I won't say everybody, but most of the people really do love the dog park and would like to use it, and I think it's definitely an eye catcher for the park. So we need to decide how much we're going to protect it and how important it is to our community.
Why don't we
before
schedule
we
the
go
balloon thing,
forward.
like, schedule it
So,
now, let's get it over with.
Okay. Al,
Do we know what the exact height of that building is?
don't you, isn't that on the,
He's given us very specific heights.
What is the specific height?
Wasn't it 36?
30 feet.
I think so.
36.
36?
35, 36, and it starts at at grade of the second terrace that's over there.
Yeah.
So it's not really a 3-story from the Bergstrom.
It's not on the terrace right now. It is below the terrace.
the top terrace?
Yes.
But it's on
And
the
it-
second terrace?
And from directly in front, from the street view, if you're facing directly south, it is basically screened by the trees. But at an
The trees
angle.
weren't
from
the
the other.
trees a little bit taller than the building when we looked at the
Yes.
sketch? Yes, the trees are already there and they're a little taller.
Can I ask, Sally, what's
Yes.
the height?
Yes,
Limits.
good question. Central Business District is 35 feet, measured on mean grade. So if the back is, say, 40 feet, and the front is 20 feet, that's an average of 30. However, again, you're an overlay district, so you can propose taller than that 35 feet.
But my point is that if it's 36 foot, we're talking a foot from,
And just to comment on the balloon test, I've had experience with that.
Yes.
The least bit of breeze will
Create a
not
problem.
give you a reliable height. What you need, what I found works well, is surveyor poles that can extend up, so you have a permanent structure, or a solid structure that will give you the height.
So I had thought our surveyor would be the one that would do that, measure that height.
There-
Is that correct, or who would do that?
Yeah, well, no, you just need that extended pole.
Okay.
So that you can get up.
Okay.
There's actually a method for using balloons that you can overcome the breeze.
A pole's are
Or
fine. I mean, a pole, something, so that we can stand where
Okay.
we're gonna stand and
We'll
see
figure something out.
how that's gonna affect it. Because once it's built, it's there forever. And we have the opportunity now to do this right. I wanna make sure it's right. I don't wanna have an eyesore that we have to live with, like so many times happens. So, that's my concern. Okay, the next thing, I would like, which fits into this, I would like to ask, since we have some extra money that has appeared, for whatever reasons, I would like to ask that we could, budget or allot $40,000 for landscaping and for the development of the Concar site. And if we can approve that, it would start with trying to determine the height, working with the developer and getting the lot lines established to start the subdivision, and would also start some landscaping and a platform around the Concar. Does that settle with anyone?
Well, what if we invest that money and
Can-
then it decides that we have to move the cars some way? I mean, that money goes right down the
Well,
toilet.
we need to decide, are we gonna
Yeah.
move the car?
I hope not.
Well, I hope not too. So do we need a vote on we don't move the car? Is that, I mean, I thought it was, I think it's good right where it's at. It's on the railroad bed, it's in the middle of our town,
I think
could
it's
serve us
perfect.
well. Do we need a vote on we are going to keep it there? Jerry and then Tanner.
anything that hinders development of that property, I'm not for, okay? So putting restrictions around the car, I think we're putting the cart before the horse. Let's let the development figure out what they need, because I don't think that we should hinder the development.
You don't think that Concar is a development?
I think that it's a beautiful asset to Woodland Station and to the community. And we can still do that, but let's not put the cart before the horse.
Tanner?
No.
Go ahead.
Well, I support the idea of improving the property. I've supported that for years. I believe it will cost money to do, and I support the DDA making that investment at the appropriate levels and time. I do think that part of the property will be an important part of the overall development and should be designed to be compatible with, complementary to the private improvements that are being proposed. Frankly, whether the cog car stays where it's at or moves a little to the east or a little to the west or a little to the north or a little to the south, I really don't care. I think it's in a great location where it is. I agree with Jerry that it's one piece in a puzzle, and if it has to move a little bit to best fit in, I don't know if we really know the answer yet. I support continuing to work with the developer, who, by the way, when I commented about this, asked what their thoughts were on our beginning improvements on the public space, the open space north of what would be their private development. Mike Williams was very enthusiastic and supported the idea, and would just like to work with us to make sure that what's being planned and installed is compatible with his vision as well, which, of course, he's very flexible with. So I think we have a good working relationship there, and if we're to make any improvements there, I'd suggest working with them through the design process to make sure that what we come up with is something we like. And I support maybe beginning the design process. So if you want to build a platform around the cog car, let's ensure that the location works for them. Let's confirm whether or not this is the final resting place of Retail Entertainment Lodge Phase 1 building or not, if that works for the board. If we can make, if the pieces can work together where they're at, then we can move forward with improvements. But I don't know if we really know that just yet. And knowing what they believe is a final concept drawing is so close, and maybe within weeks of being submitted to us for review, I'd say let's not put the cart before the horse and jump too much too soon. Is the platform around the cog car a priority? Is that one of the first things or most important things in your mind for this area? It certainly, I'm thinking, would be one of the more expensive improvements that we'd be considering. And if so, is it appropriate to maybe reach out to someone like David Langley and ask for some rough ideas for what that would look like? Historic railroad, mountain style platform? Is that a good start?
I think that's a very good start, and that's kind of what I had thought. If we can get some money set aside to do that, to approach it from a development side, and I work with the developer that we have, I think that we can make it fit together. We can make it look right. We've got to start somewhere. We've got to do something with, if the cog car is going to stay there and be part of the development, we need to do something to ensure its space and to make it usable, which is what the community wants. They want in it. They want it, why can't we go in it? Well, you can't get in it safely. So I just think it's a moving forward. And I'm not saying for 1 minute not to work with the developer. That isn't what this is about. This is about, let's get started. We've got to clean up over there. It looks bad. We've got to mow the place. We need some money that we can put in for just some maintenance on it, if nothing else. Ellen?
I think maybe we should decide whether there should be some money set aside for some architectural renderings of the platform. I also think there should be a discussion of whether the developers can move that. I think they would probably say no, moving it all the way down to Saddle Club or whatnot, but whether that can go south a little further without going completely south. And I also wondered, when is the plaque going to be put on the car? Is that moving forward?
Yes, it is.
Because
Dwayne
that's
is trying to
exciting. That's
set
an
a date
improvement.
when his family can be here to do that, and then we'll make sure that the board knows and can show up.
So the plaque's already been made?
The plaque is here.
Oh, wow.
The plaque is going to be mounted on the door of the cog car. They looked at with the insides, the workings of the car. That would be the safest place to put it without damaging the car. And that seems to be all right. But if
I agree with Ellen, if we can, earmark something to get Mr. Langley going, get us, some some basic drawings and things like that. And, to do the weed whacking, I can get out there. I don't own a weed whacker. Whoever wants to loan me one, I'll put in the work. Or a lawnmower, I try to get around that, around the cog, because I'm sure it's growing up on the backside, and around the stagecoach. But I think as far as this move on this tall building, I think they're pretty firm on
They
wanting
said they
it there.
are.
Yeah,
They said they
and
are.
I think that my worry would be too much pushback. They could go away, and that seems like their main baby right there. It's pretty important, getting that, looking and seeing. But I don't, it's not in front of my building.
The reason that I went all the way to the street with that 60 feet is to accommodate the horse and wagon too.
Right.
Because the horse and wagon will have to move
Yeah,
if this site goes
and
on,
yeah.
and I don't know where it would go.
Right.
And people really like it.
Sure. And that's an easy move. It's a lot easier than the car.
Oh, yeah.
So,
But that one would have to find a home for.
yeah, and I don't think that part would be that hard. I think moving the cog, even if it were 20 feet west, would be expensive. We put it where we put it.
Yeah, because it's welded to those,
Right,
to those tracks so that it won't move because they didn't want it rolling.
The greasy tracks will pick up with the wheels.
Okay, well, then let me ask you this, then can we allot some money? What I'm talking about needs mowed, that lower part needs mowed. They had a fire there, 2 years ago? When it dried out, and that's really tall, the seeding, we can hay it, it's tall enough. So that needs to be cut, just for the neighborhood. So anyway, do we get, Tanner?
Well, as far as budgeting for these things, the 2020 budget was approved, and that's what we need to work within if we can, and anything outside of that, if we're going to exceed our expenditures, the budgeted expenditures, then we would be asking council for supplemental appropriation. So the amount of money we can expend on this is somewhat limited. Right now, we have $10,000 in the Woodland Station improvements line item, and we're at $5,003 in expense so far. So we have $4,997 left. We also have more planning, that we're in the midst of development planning, or at least concept planning. So we may have some more expense there. Where will we be with our other budget items, and how will those affect the overall budget by year end? Well, I don't know, other than we budgeted $721,648, for TIF revenues, and that was assuming 80.05 mills, and the mills that were certified in December of last year, after our budget, were 78 point something. So I can tell you our 2020 revenue projections are about 20,000 less than what we budgeted. But that will also have an effect on the TIF reimbursements, effectively reducing those, which are expenditures. So I haven't projected what those will look like, but I guess I'm just expressing to the board, we have a budget to work within. If you want $40,000, it's going to be pretty hard to find in the existing budget without going to council for supplemental appropriation.
Can we use any of the monies that we didn't spend in the last 2 years from the budgeted monies?
Well, sure,
For
but
that?
I think that still goes to council for supplemental appropriation. The 2020 budget as approved is what we work within.
Well, then can we go to council? I think this is important. I think we need to do something positive. We need to do something. We're just stuck. We keep talking about this development, we don't,
Well, we have $10,000 in beautification as well, and we haven't spent any of that money, although pressure washing is on our agenda, and I do have a bid It's $3,900, I think. $3,940. So there's that. That would leave us with $6,560 in beautification. I have a hard time seeing us get to 40 comfortably, but 10 is probably reasonable as far as what I can see in
Okay.
the existing budget.
Well, that's a start.
And I don't know that we would need nearly that much if we're just in concept for platform around the cog. If we were to go to someone like David Langley and say, tell him what we're trying to do, share with him a picture of the Yankee Girl head frame structure as the example that was given for this one building, and want to stay in the old Western Railroad mining theme. What does that look like? I think you could sketch a couple of ideas for us pretty quickly and relatively inexpensive.
So then we can come up with 10,000? Yes, Jerry?
I don't disagree with you to enhance the property and to make these improvements. My comments are directed that maybe it's just premature to spend money that might not, you might be wasting in a sense, if it's torn up or whatever, it just doesn't fit, or that could hinder the development. So my suggestion would be that we just kind of hold on for a little bit longer and see how things play out. And then I'm in total agreement. If that's where it's going to stay and we can get the developer, let's spend the money to make it more usable. But I just question the urgency to do this. I think we'd be more prudent to have all the facts.
Go ahead, Robert.
Just on that point, it sounds like there's more than enough in the budget to do the sort of cleanup stuff that would at least give the sense that the place is usable. So, and I think that respecting what Jerry's saying, it could still clean up some. Some of this could get cleaned up because it looks kind of neglected, and we're in the middle of tourist season. So,
Al?
To do the cleanup and whatever's appropriate on the site, as common, proper governance and stewardship of that land, I think is appropriate, most assuredly. But here's where my basic frustration comes from. Right before me, right now, I've got 4 different concept plans, none of which has come to fruition. And we're talking about more concept plans. How do we get, we'll say, Mike to come forward with a firm proposal? He's not doing it. He just keeps floating stuff out to us to try to make some decisions for him that we probably should not be making. It should be up to him to develop the plan and then bring it to us. Not float 4 different concept plans, and there's probably more out there. Historically, I've seen lots of concept plans, none of which have come to fruition because the people's feet were not held to the fire to perform. So how do we get them to perform? Maybe one way is to, and I'm going to go back, develop that particular piece of property, define it what it is, define a legal place for the cog car, and say to the market, here's what we have to offer. This is the piece of ground. Here is a listing of where the infrastructures are and what some of the improvements might be. And then let the marketplace put pressure on Mike. And not keep dancing with this, because we're going to be doing this next year at this time too.
That's my concern.
Yeah.
I just want to move forward with something. That's my concern. But
It's not, yeah.
Goes to the negotiating committee, because they're the ones that are talking to them. So Murph is wiggling over here. What do you got to say, Murph?
Anybody got a quick 10 million I can borrow? I'll develop it tomorrow. Money, time, energy, development equals time, and you don't have 4 proposals there. You have a progression of proposals, sir.
Well, that could be, but the
No, it
concept,
is.
layout.
It is.
Yeah.
The layouts, and he is, the last email said what, Tanner? They are coming with, they about got it nailed down, do they not?
3 to 4 weeks? 4 to 5 weeks?
They have what they believe is a finalized plan. They're waiting for one more investor party on their team to review it, who's not had a chance to review it, before they submit it to us.
Okay.
Well,
Now,
that's in a reasonable time frame. We can make that many more weeks.
If the board likes it and approves that, it would be, well, up to the board as to how to proceed. But what's been proposed by the developer is that if their sketch that we will be receiving is approved by the board, we would then submit it to John at NES for a final version of a concept plan. So we can wash our hands of concept and say, this is it, a formal vote to approve it or not. And if it's approved by the board, it's now their concept is approved and they can either proceed with development or not. We would be negotiating a disposition and development agreement, trying to agree to terms on the sale price of the property, the phasing and schedule. Their finance plan would have to be produced, the platting would have to be done. That we're in real development mode instead of concept.
On submitting their concept plans to NES, who's paying for that? Why? That's their expense.
So
Go ahead.
we started that back when we had competing development proposals. And this board was in a position of having 2 different parties proposing uses for the property. And we took the position that what was in the public's best interest, our best interest, was to try and combine them and get the developers to work together and not pick one or the other. And working with an independent party like NES to combine those proposals is what we decided to do. That put us sort of in the middle, which is our role. It's our property. We're tasked with bringing about the development of it. And again, with competing private proposals, that was the path. And it seemed logical because, for a number of reasons, including that NES already has the files on the property, preliminary plats and surveys and topos, and they have all that information, and we're able to begin work very
I see that.
cost-effectively.
We've got 5 minutes to
Yes.
clear this up because they're going to use this for another meeting.
So that's how we ended up in the position. Then Tava House bailed on the project, and here, we got left partway down the road without one of the developers and kicking around ideas. And we've also imposed some restrictions just by nature of the property and the agreement we're under with the city. And our board has had opinions, like what we've heard today. We want them to move their building. We want it to look like this. We want it to be located there. And to be dictating those things or making those requests without being participants in the process, strikes me as perhaps a little bit unfair. We're trying to facilitate the development. And to me, that's what our $5,000 expenditure and hiring of NES reflects.
Okay.
We've got 5 minutes to get out of here. There's another meeting coming in here at 9 o'clock. So obviously, this is all up in the air. We still don't have any. Do you want to schedule another meeting? Do you want to just table this and we'll catch it at our next? As a board, what do you want to do? Because we've got to leave.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we allocate up to $500 for the mowing and weed whacking of Woodland Station to make it look presentable.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll do that. I'll take care of that.
And I'll
Nick?
work with Mary Jo and try and get the
Okay.
mowing done. I'll run down there in my free time on a Sunday, and
Okay.
we'll try to get that going.
All right, so we'll do that.
I'm going to reach out to Dave Langley and just ask him what it would look like to work with him for some ideas on platform and surrounding
Agreed.
COG.
Mary Jo?
Improvements.
Yes,
One thing that's come out of here, I think before they do the final plan on this, it's really a good idea for Al to talk to Weatherford, because if you put this whole thing together and just get his input, just saying, I think it would be better preemptive rather than post.
okay.
Agreed.
Should I
Do
reach
I-
out?
do I-
What's the decision? Yeah.
We will decide what to do. We'll maybe call a special meeting before August 1st. We'll negotiate whether we have to decide on anything. We'll wait to see what happens with the plans. We need a motion to adjourn.
Well, at
Is
the
that-
direction of the board, I am willing, to proceed to contact Arden and see if anything can be brought forward. I'll stick my toe in the water and see how hot.
Okay. Okay,
Good idea.
This is ludicrous,
all right.
totally ludicrous.
Pressure washing, have $3,940 estimate here. That's for all the private properties on the north side of the highway, plus a couple of the buildings on the south side. Not all of them, because of how far some of those buildings on the south side sit back. And
I think it's after the fact now. I think that our tour season, after the 4th of July, it just starts going down. My personal thing with Alan, that we just forget it till next year.
I'm still trying to figure out why we have to pay for that, and we've already paid $100,000 for this machine, and all we're doing is paying to that.
This,
it's not CDOT property, it's the
No.
private properties.
This is private. It's private.
That's what we're using that machine for, the taxpayers pay.
No,
That's all I'm saying.
So the private properties are the responsibility of private property owners. And this has been a tough year economically, and many may not be. And so with the idea of cleaning the mag chloride and the dust and the grime and the exhaust and all the dirt and stuff off the private properties, washing COVID down the drain, is that something we want to do? It's $3,940. They would coordinate with the city as needed for water reclamation, but they do have their own water recovery system, so.
I still think, wait till next year.
When would it occur? It should have happened weeks ago.
Right. Yeah, I've got the estimate, and this is our first meeting since I've received this estimate. The contractor we typically use, his equipment's still broken, it's in for repair. They tend to be less expensive. They don't have their own water recapturing system, but they're unavailable this year. So Top Gun is somebody we have worked with in the past once, and that's where the estimate's from. So is that something
We got a half a minute to make a motion and decide whether or not to do this. I make a motion that we wait till next year. All those in favor? Opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, so we're going to do it?
Yeah, I make a motion, we do it?
Second.
So we have a motion, second.
Time for discussion's over.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll get the power washing done. I need a motion to adjourn.
Move to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Second, all those in favor? Aye. Motion adjourned. Sorry, guys.
Suzanne, you need these left.
Go right into another meeting.